The very distinguished set of professionals who have graced the stage, and the distinguished members of the audience, including our very dear students, young lawyers, and everyone present here. Well, actually, I had a sense of comfort when I came here. I said, this is a weekday morning when people are busy with attending to miscellaneous cases in the Supreme Court, and particularly 9:45 in the morning, I said, is the ideal time for not having participants in a hall. So I said that, well, it'll be great. I probably would be speaking to a hall of maybe the few diehards who contribute to the success of Oak Bridge, including Mr. Shrish Chandra, and then I'll probably have to go home. When I come here and I see this huge audience, I'm truly humbled and excited at the same time. A very pleasant morning to all of you. I'm thrilled to be addressing such a vibrant audience on a subject which is close to our hearts, I presume, by the sheer presence of all of you in these numbers. As someone who spent a large part of my life reading and rereading for a living, I do believe that the inward-looking purpose of literature, marinating in the written word and emerging wiser, often slips into the backdrop of our very busy lives. I use the expression reading and rereading for the simple reason that as men and women in the law, we realize that the reading of any legal document, and particularly legal literature, is never complete with just the first or even a couple of reads. Every time that you read something which is close to your heart, or even if it isn't, you gather new perspectives, new insights. As you evolve in life, so also the literature which you read has a new meaning and content. The practice of law and lawmaking demand that we explore beyond our own finite lives. Literature offers us a window into the world besides our own. Judges are faced with litigants whose experiences are vastly different from their own. A lawyer represents a diverse array of people, and academics study demographics widely different from theirs. We cannot help but fall back on literature to correct ourselves, to humble ourselves, and to learn about the people we serve. It was believed that roughly until the American Civil War, a lawyer was, by and large, meant to be interested in literature. This was until Christopher Columbus Langdell, an academic and dean at Harvard Law School, popularized law as an autonomous discipline, a standalone discipline. The Langdellian form of law, named after Christopher Langdell, was an inward-looking, independent form of law. It treated law as a standalone discipline, unconnected with the rest of social sciences. It resembled science more than it did humanities. Eventually, however, a phenomenon that scholars called law ands, and I'll repeat it, law ands, which included law and literature, law and philosophy, law and economics, gained sway instead of the Langdellian understanding. The boundaries between law and other disciplines, literature, philosophy, and economics, came crashing down. The bottom line, as Mark Galanter concluded way back in 1977, remained that law was not to be understood on its own, but that it requires the application of some method or substance provided by other disciplines. Literature is one such discipline. The law and literature movement therefore presumes that literature may indeed shed light on law's gaps, interpretation, and narration. That law is not an autonomous discipline is clear, but the degree to which it may look to literature remains contentious. There are diverse strands of beliefs about how law and literature intersect, or whether they intersect at all. Should we rely on literature, something external to law, to inform our reading of the law? How far should we leap beyond law's internal wisdom? Having been a judge and a lawyer for as long as I was, it was my endeavor to challenge myself with literature, learn from it, and imbibe it in my work. That explains why you will find traces of Leonard Cohen in my judgments, as I did in Navtej Singh Johar when I cited his very well-known piece called Democracy, or Bob Dylan for that matter. Exploring law and literature as a holistic area of academic study is, however, beyond the remit of my address and expertise. I wish to talk instead about one, literature as a mediator between law and society and a corrective tool for the law, and two, the deeper purpose of literature, which is to create a critical, questioning, and discursive society that eventually shapes laws for the better. Let me deal with the first theme, which is literature as a course corrector. Having spent my life in law, I have found immense wisdom, depth, and solace in literature myself. And that's not just about literature in English, whether it's Somerset Maugham, who had a great impact on my life when I read Of Human Bondage, or The Moon and Sixpence, or The Razor's Edge. Not just English literature or contemporary English literature, but literature beyond English. Pula Deshpande's Varyavarchi Varat, Munshi Premchand's Gaban. Fiction and non-fiction alike shape our lives in ways that lived experiences do not. Why limit ourselves to our own learnings when we could learn from a gallery of life portraits? It is almost akin to having lived multiple lives ourselves, only in the course of a few pages of text. Dr. Ambedkar was persuaded to introduce the principle of constitutional morality as envisioned by an English historian's work on ancient Greek history. Look at the connection. Dr. Ambedkar and ancient Greeks' work as mediated by an English historian. It is what Justice Deepak Mishra could eventually rely on to relegate Section 377 of the Penal Code to the annals of history. I myself felt compelled by staggering critical works of literature which evidenced the obsolescence of the law. I remember as a young 9th standard student reading Gaban and the travails of Jalpa and her husband, who is trapped by the police when he was really innocent. And then you realize the extent of the law's injustices. So I was all of 13, 14 years old when I came face to face with the brush of social reality that you see in the operation of law in society. E.M. Forster, the noted author, captured literature's ability to sensitize people and hopefully the law as well when he said, "What is wonderful about great literature is that it transforms the man who reads it towards the condition of the man who wrote it." Literature confronts the letter of the law with the lived experiences of the people it governs. It not only informs the genesis of law, but also constantly redirects the course of the law, should it veer towards majoritarianism. Literature pushes back against marginalizing impulses and brings difficult conversations to the mainstream. I remember reading Cry the Beloved Country by Alan Paton, who dealt with apartheid in racial South Africa, which had a big impact on how the law itself can be a perpetrator of injustice when you allow characteristics over which humans have no control to be used as a focal point for discrimination. Another instance, the now outmoded law on disabilities, the Persons with Disabilities Act 1995, adopted a medical understanding of disability. Persons with disabilities were defined as persons suffering from at least 40% of any disability, as certified by a medical authority. The definition implied that the so-called suffering bodies of the people were what disabled them. Over several litigations, civil society engagement, and the rest, lawmakers eventually recognized that it was the society that disabled a person and that we could do better. The Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act of 2016 did away with this medical narrative that's fixated on people's bodies rather than society's deficiencies. Section 2S of the 2016 Act defines a person with disability as someone with long-term physical, mental, intellectual, or sensory impairment, which in interaction with barriers hinders his full and effective participation in society equally with others. A piece of literature from a statute. This understanding of what the law should be is derived in no small measure from the body of literature that scrutinized disability law and argued that disability was not a physical anomaly but a social reality. Literature, we may therefore agree, humanizes the law. What legal text may lack in context, compassion, and currency, it may derive from literature. As lawyers and legal professionals and judges make moral decisions, the law may invariably fall short in a dynamic world. Even settled ideas may require a deeper understanding in line with the altered social reality. The written letter of the law certainly embodies equality, but a fundamentally unequal society requires more than the simplistic equal treatment of all. The content of equality often transcends the written letter itself. To give you an example, deciding upon the validity of the subclassification of scheduled castes and scheduled tribes for distributing affirmative action required us on the bench of the Supreme Court to have a deeper sociological, historical, and statistical understanding of the realities of our society. This looking beyond the law is essential for perspective, for clarity. Granular data emerging from the grassroots must regularly inform the law for it to remain in sync with our changing world. We as judges and readers of the law cannot afford to look away. The second theme which I have is literature as a tool for critical engagement. Now, on the second prong, the core purpose of literature, in my view, is more than just a course correction in law. Before literature affects legal change, there is an acknowledgement that there is something else, something better that we could be doing with our laws. Critical engagement is a front runner for transformation. Reading Franz Kafka's The Trial or watching Chaitanya Tamhane's Court entails an uncomfortable reckoning with the realities of our legal worlds that our relative privilege may keep us away from. Literature is therefore not just a sport of the ideal or a corrective bridge to laws of the future. It is a foremost medium of acknowledgement of this immense discomfort and unease with the status quo. This discomfort to me is foundational to meaningful social change and is also therefore the primary purpose of reading literature for improving our laws. An important caveat before I conclude. We must strictly guard against the impulse to accept literature that fills the gaps in our worldview without challenging it. Some of you may have watched the Netflix documentary titled The Social Dilemma. One of its messages remained with me that the quest for personalization is pushing us into digital silos, and we are basically viewing more of what we agree with and less of what might potentially challenge us. A sincere engagement with literature is not finding authoritative texts which fortify our personal beliefs and biases. Doing so may be doing us a profound disservice as individuals and as a society. I do not mean to create a gradation within literature when I refer to its critical potential. Fiction may, in many ways, be of greater critical value simply because it reaches a wider audience in a much more palatable format. It is then no wonder that the terms Kafkaesque and Orwellian were readily co-opted by judges and academics in the US. Speaking further to the communicative power of fiction, until 2009, Franz Kafka had been cited over 400 times in American judgments. Speaking for myself, while I take great joy in going to a bookstore and picking up a book which I want to read, I take equal, if not greater, joy in reading books which someone else has presented to me. Because I believe the great danger in only reading what you would like to read or picking up only what you would like to read is to further confine us to the silos of our existence. On the other hand, listening to some music which has been given to you by others opens your mind to thoughts, to notes, to annotations which are different from your own. And what greater way to challenge our own existence so as to allow us to evolve to a higher plane than reading, listening, watching, and imbibing thoughts which are not thoughts which necessarily agree with our own. I will take the liberty of concluding this address with some advice. Critical engagement with literature across diverse forms, languages, and genres is essential. Later today, we talk about judges and institution building. Let me then preface this address with a primer of what I think institutional responsibility entails. I believe that the responsibility to keep our institutions from veering off course lies on those within and beyond institutions alike. And in discharge of this responsibility, literature can serve as a fantastic moral compass. Conversations about literature and its meanderings into the law are welcome first steps and must travel beyond Delhi. I'm therefore delighted to hear that Oakbridge is taking this platform from Delhi to Prayagraj, a city in which I spent 3 very beautiful years of my life learning about law, society, and the nation. If wisdom lies in several languages, the law must not stop short of absorbing those insights from languages alike. Some of the most eminent luminaries traveled across law, literature, and even languages with striking felicity. Besides a towering body of authoritative legal texts, Justice Hidayatullah authored various Urdu books, including a critical study of Ahmad Raza's Urdu poetry. His love for literature, philosophy, and writing transcended languages. Sanskrit, Urdu, Persian, Bengali, French, Latin, and King's English was hardly concealed. Justice Ranjit Singh Sarkaria of the famous Sarkaria Commission, another former judge of the Supreme Court, translated various legal and non-legal works from English to Punjabi. He published the English Hindi Punjabi Dictionary of Legal and Administrative Terms and an anthology of English poems rendered into Punjabi verse. We must follow in their footsteps while carving out paths of our own. Listen to the genius of Sir Vivian Bose in one of his judgments, or the pithy genius of Chief Justice Muhammad Karim Chagla as Chief Justice of the Bombay High Court. Like law, literature emerges from our society. And like society, it is far from being monolithic. In opening the law to literature and society, we of course run the risk of it getting colored by what may be popular, but not necessarily the best. Especially in a day and age where information is often mistaken for knowledge, and the line between fact and fiction is blurred in the process, we must proceed with caution. On both professional and personal levels, we must challenge ourselves and rise above our most deeply held biases. Literature that would support nearly every proposition under the sun, legal, moral, or social, is simply a click away. It is not enough to scour for pliant authorities, to save a personal belief, because find we will. To read literature that fortifies our individual beliefs is reductive at best and divisive at worst. As professionals interested in the onward march of our constitutional values, our job is to expand the frontiers of the law and not to deploy literature to constrict or restrain those boundaries. Therefore, I'll conclude by making this appeal to all of you that the true worth of literature is not to fortify, not just to affirm, but to challenge. And the value of great literature and the great thought which underlies it is in this process of challenging to accept our own evolution as individuals, as a society, and as humanity into a higher plane of consciousness. Thank you very much for being here this morning. I'm delighted.